Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Armand. I'm the Deputy Director of Community Engagement at the T, and I'm the moderator for tonight's meeting, and we really appreciate you joining us tonight. Tonight's meeting is to speak to about the MBTA's FY 2025-2029 Capital Investment Plan. I'd like to introduce the interpretation service for this public meeting so that people who need them can have access to them. Our interpretation for tonight will be in Spanish, Chinese, and ASL. If you require interpretation in Spanish and Chinese, please click the interpretation button on your screen. That's the globe icon, and select your preferred language. We also have ASL interpretation for tonight's meeting. That's Matt Kelly and Brenna Rainey. If you'd like ASL interpretation, keep your view settings in gallery mode. To pin the interpreter's video, click on the ellipses in the top right corner of the interpreter's video and click pin video if you don't already see it pinned. And you'll need to repeat this process each time if you don't see it. But again, let us know. You can email tech support or chat us here in the chat and we'll be able to respond to you. Closed captioning is also available. Please click the CC button at the bottom of your screen. The captions are able to be moved to align with your needs. Can we progress the slides, please? Next slide. We've gone over this one and this one. And we've let you know about the closed captionings. So lastly, if you need technical assistance with Zoom, you can please chat tech support here in the chat. They're named tech support. And if you have a question about the presentation, you can also send any questions to someone who's entitled Ask Questions here in the chat. And at the end of the presentation, you can also raise your hand and I can unmute you. And you can also ask any of your questions to ask questions here as well. Next slide. Further, we'd like to emphasize that all MBTA activities, including public meetings, are free of discrimination. The MBTA complies with all federal and state civil rights requirements preventing discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, limited English proficiency, and additional protected characteristics. We welcome the diversity from across our entire service area. If you have any questions or concern, you can visit this link right here. We'll also place this in the chat to reach the Office of Diversity and Civil Rights. I'll now like to hand this over to Lindsay Heffernan, our Chief of Policy and Strategic Planning, as well as Ryan Josty, our Director of Capital Program and Planning. Lindsay?
Great. Can you hear me okay, Ashley?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. I also want to welcome everybody for being with us this evening. We're excited to present and hear any feedback that the public has on our FY25-2029 Capital Investment Plan. This plan is aligned with the goals of the administration, the Secretary of Transportation, and our own general manager. And the proposed CIP includes investments that target critical asset needs and keep the T on a path to better safety, service, and sustainability. We hope to advance some of our objectives that you see on the screen here, including focusing on safety, reliability, and modernization, accessibility, and sustainability and resilience across our system. Go to the next slide, please. Thanks. What is the CIP? Our capital plan encompasses all of our capital expenditures programmed for the next 5 years. It includes new and ongoing projects and is updated every year per legislative mandate. The CIP is fiscally constrained, meaning we account for our current commitments and funding sources to program and investments based on funding that we believe we will have available over the next 5 years. On the right, you can see the major steps in the CIP development. First, we identify capital needs, then we evaluate and score projects. We then determine the funds available to achieve our fiscal constraint. We then prioritize our projects and sequence our investments every year, bringing us to the place where we are tonight to release the CIP and receive public comment and feedback. As we'll talk about at the end of these slides, we'll be going back to our board in about a month to share where we are after public feedback and ultimately hoping to vote on the plan for this year. So you can turn to the next slide, please. I do want to take a moment, though, to step back and talk about our overarching capital program strategy beyond just the 5-year CIP. Under the leadership of General Manager Ang, and to support the delivery of programmed investments in the CIP, the MBTA is revamping our capital program strategy to generate efficiencies and deliver projects that are on time and on budget. To advance the Commonwealth vision, the authority has taken the following actions. To ensure efficient spending, we have reviewed all prior projects in the CIP to course correct as needed and ensure efficient spending while critically reviewing all new project requests. So just for a point of scale, we had about 620 projects in last year's capital investment plan. And when I say we reviewed them all, I mean all of them, in order to make sure that each of those projects was still a priority today, and each of those projects was aligned to make sure that we could deliver. We also, to drive investments, are using the capital needs assessment, which was released this past fall. That asset information should be used to drive our decision making. Where we know we have greater needs is where we hope to be making more investments. And to support our planned investments in the CIP, we also, as an organization, are restructuring the organizational delivery of capital projects. We are improving right-of-way access to minimize disruption, hopefully reduce construction costs and the costs associated at times with busings for diversions. We're also trying to build up our internal workforce capacity to support a state of good repair across our system and our ability to deliver that. And we're working to ensure competitiveness and supplier diversity within our contractor pools. And so looking to make sure that the T is always spending our dollars as efficiently as possible. We can go to the next slide, please. In light of that, I want to talk about two programs that have received a fair bit of attention over the last few months and that are really highlight how we are changing how we do business here. Part of our capital program strategy entails are making difficult decisions to safeguard and prioritize the safety of our riders, the reliability of our service, and the modernization of our crucial assets. Grounded in both asset criticality and our ability to deliver, the authority plans to repurpose and or allocate new or additional funding in the proposed CIP. And I want to talk about two particular projects. On one side of your screen here, you see the track improvement program. And in this case, we are resequencing funds that we had previously allocated to some projects in order to make sure this critical work is done. To remind folks, this is designed to give riders a system they deserve. We are working as an authority to remove all existing rapid transit slow zones that were on the system as of November 2023. To support that program's near-term needs, funds from existing projects needed to be resequenced, including the Longfellow Viaduct rehabilitation, a commuter rail maintenance facility in Billerica, and track and signal replacement work along the Green Line Central Tunnel. This funding has been resequenced, and to keep these projects on their current timelines, they will need to be refunded at an appropriate time in the future. Many stories have been written about our red and orange line cars and vehicles. Those vehicles are 4 times more reliable than our aging fleet that we're seeking to replace, and will greatly improve the reliability of our service on both the red and the orange line. To support the new fleet delivery, by the end of 2027, and that is 2 years earlier than our vendor was initially planning to deliver those vehicles, the authority has assigned new funding to the red and orange line vehicle procurement project in the proposed 25 to 29 CIP, with funding coming from a variety of sources I'd like to just explain for a moment. In terms of new funding available in the CIP, every year we have a new amount of funding. This year it is $843 million. 53.7 of those million dollars are going to the red and orange line vehicles. But one of the reasons that the general manager and myself and Ryan, who you'll hear from shortly, locked ourselves in a room to go through all of our projects is that we thought there were efficiencies that we could find within the projects that we currently have. Surplus funding from some of our projects that are either no longer needed has been repurposed in order to meet this strategic goal. So for example, the MBTA as an authority was holding a little over $46 million for an option to procure hybrid electric buses. It's been a long work day. However, as an authority, we have decided to shift entirely as a matter of policy to battery electric buses. So while we were holding dollars in the CIP for an option to possibly purchase more hybrid electric buses, those dollars are being repurposed now to the red and orange line vehicles. There were other examples of expensive machinery that we needed to purchase that had a high contingency because some machinery needed to be specially designed. We had an $8 million contingency in that, in one case, for a special rail vacuum vehicle, a vehicle that can move along our tracks and vacuum up any debris. Debris is a problem on the right-of-way because it leads to fires when it touches the third rail. And so while that vehicle was important and that vehicle being purchased, we no longer needed such a high contingency. And only by reviewing every project in the CIP could we find some of these dollars. Ultimately, all told, we were able to, between projects that were in closeout, projects that had surplus funding, or looking at funding that we thought was no longer needed for certain projects, identify $80.3 million from our 24 to 28 CIP that we are putting towards the red and orange line vehicles. And then lastly, we had to look at a couple of projects and ask if the dollars that were being held there were the right choice for the authority. In particular, I want to talk about Arborway bus facility design. Arborway bus facility is probably our most crucial project in the bus network. It is being designed in order to accommodate 200 battery electric buses and is absolutely going to be necessary for us to achieve full electrification across the system. However, the Arborway bus facilities full construction costs are right now hovering a little over $500 million. The Arborway bus facility design line item within the CIP was holding about $33 million. And yet, while we have some folks I know from that team on our call this evening, they need somewhere between $2 and $3 million to complete design. So significantly more money than was needed for design, but significantly less money than was needed to be actually able to construct the project. We have reallocated $8.1 million from that project to the red and orange line vehicle project. Again, not because Arborway isn't critical and important, but because having those dollars sit there year after year while we try to accumulate a little more money this year and a little more money next year isn't going to be a strategy that probably is going to be successful on a project that frankly is as expensive as Arborway. We also looked at places where we could find efficiencies. The Copley to Arlington track replacement project had $5.9 million that was allocated to the red and orange line vehicles after we recognized that the track improvement program that you see on the other side of the screen here had really accommodated the vast majority of the work that was originally scoped and designed in the Copley to Arlington track replacement. So when we sum all this together, we have about $15 million, maybe $14 million that are dollars repurposes from current projects, $80 million of funding that is looking back in old projects and asking if they're being spent as efficiently or aligned with our current priorities, and about $53 million of new dollars. I will say, as an authority, in no recent time have we reviewed every single project in the CIP. We will be doing it every year going forward to make sure that our dollars are being, frankly, and your tax dollars are being spent as efficiently as possible and achieving the best outcomes for our riders. At this point in time, I'm going to go to the next slide. I'm going to hand it over to Ryan to talk about what we are funding, and I will be back in a few minutes to talk about some of our challenges. Ryan, go ahead.
Thank you, Lindsay. Appreciate it. Overall, the CIP includes 630 projects with a total program spend reaching approximately $9.6 billion over the 5 years of the program. Of that $9.6 billion, $843 million is in new funding. New funding is programmed for both new projects not previously included in last year's CIP and projects included in the existing CIP, which required additional funding. This spending is broken down by mode in the table on the slide, and you can see that rapid transit accounts for the highest level of program spending, followed by commuter rail, system-wide investments, and bus and silver line. The funding makeup includes federal funds, which account for 38% of the program spend. State funds make up another 11%, and 50% of the spending is MBTA bonds. Another 1% rounds out our funding, which is in reimbursable fundings, which are agreements with private and public entities. Next slide, please. Highlighted in this slide are some major investments included in the CIP. To support our investment objectives and to briefly highlight some of them, under structures and station improvements, we have full funding for North Station Draw 1 bridge replacement. This is critical to the commuter rail service, as there will be no north side service if North Station Draw is not repaired. Funding is proposed to allocate to advance bus network redesign and transit signal priority, as well as infrastructure needs for a decarbonized pilot on the commuter rail line. Additionally, the proposed CIP also entails work tied to our tracks, right-of-way, service redundancy, and sustainability and resilience of our system. I would also note that the Equity and Diversity program, which includes regional rail service along the EJ corridor, as well as our continued sustainability and resiliency investments. Next slide, please. The MBTA continues to make major investments in locations targeting a high portion of riders that are low income, those protected on the basis of race and ethnicity, or come from low vehicle households, as well as older adults and riders with disabilities. Specific investments include design efforts and early actions to support rail modernization on the EJ corridor and design of accessibility and circulation improvements at Nubian Square bus station. We are also making a number of improvements to facilities for our frontline workforce, including improvements to facilities across the commuter rail, rapid transit, bus networks, and improvements to facilities on the right-of-way. Next slide, please. The MBTA remains committed to bus and rail modernization and continues to advance these initiatives with current funding allocations and new funding included in the proposed 25 to 29 CIP. Regarding bus modernization, the CIP includes new funding for ongoing implementation of bus network redesign and the 2023 Transit Priority Vision that was presented and approved by our Board of Directors. Current funding continues to advance the construction of the new Quincy bus facility, the retrofit of the North Cambridge facility, the procurement of battery electric buses, and the overhaul of our existing fleet as we transition to an electric fleet. Rail modernization. The CIP includes new funding for infrastructure to support decarbonized service on the Fairmount line. New funding also encompasses rail modernization planning. Current funds will continue to support design activities for decarbonized service on the environmental justice through LIN and rail modernization early actions on the Framingham-Worcester line. Next slide, please. A key piece of the puzzle as we work to bring the system into a state of good repair is modernization. Our focus on SGR also represents an opportunity to modernize and upgrade our assets, revitalize and improve our system's reliability, accessibility, and sustainability. Under this investment objective, the focus is to bolster asset-based programs, enhance access to our right-of-way, beginning with the red line, and strengthening our efforts targeting our facilities. Examples of SGR modernization efforts in the CIP include, as I mentioned earlier, North Station Draw, to ensure the continuity of all service on the commuter rail's north side, which is pictured here on the left, and the Green Line's Type 10 vehicle procurement, which will increase capacity and accessibility, which we have here on the right. Next slide, please. Accessibility is another one of our key objectives, targeting current inaccessible stations and stops and other priority locations, with a focus on passenger facilities, vehicle fleets, and the ways in which our riders interact with our system. To provide equitable access for all riders, the proposed CIP includes funding for major accessibility improvements. On the Green Line and bus system, the MBTA is proposing to fully fund through construction accessibility improvements at inaccessible stations and bus stops. On the commuter rail and ferry system, the intent is the same, with funding assigned to improve accessibility at several of our passenger facilities. Slide, please. Our final key investment objective is the sustainability and resilience of our transit system and supporting the state and MBTA's important climate and mobility goals. As we work to hit these targets, additional planning efforts for climate mitigation and adaptation are key to building a sustainable and resilient system. The proposed CIP sets us up for the future with additional funding for vulnerability assessments and adaptation planning for all of our modes and assets. Additional proposed funding for fleet upgrades, energy efficiency measures, electric vehicle charging stations at facilities across our system, and fleet decarbonization and electrification efforts will help us advance towards our sustainability goals while also improving climate resilience and service redundancy. And at this time, I will hand it back over to Lindsay, who will wrap up our presentation.
We can go to the next slide, please. Great. So I want to spend a moment talking about what challenges the MBTA has to meet this vision for the future. We can go to the next slide. I think probably it's most important to begin with that the MBTA has an awful lot of needs. Our state of good repair needs is highlighted in the 2023 Capital Needs Assessment and Report. Can you hear me, folks? Okay, it's better. Sorry. Are significant. While this exercise to assess our capital needs is a valuable tool for the capital program and an important part of our strategy, what we are not saying is that the MBTA needs $24 billion today. However, each one of these circles or donuts you can see on the screen shows the percentage of our assets that are out of a state of good repair or in blue, representing a very complex portfolio of over 75,000 assets that need to be further evaluated, assembled into capital project or program that can tackle those replacements over multiple years. Similar to the track improvement program, addressing the condition of our assets requires a complex and multi-year planning, design, and construction and procurement process. Having this asset information is available offers the authority an opportunity to assess where we are keeping pace with the necessary replacement cycle of our own assets and helps to inform where additional investments may be necessary. You can go to the next slide, please. Our second major challenge is that when we look over the long term, we see a decline in our overarching funding sources. So beyond our current 5-year window, which is the first 5 bars on this graph, our current out-year assumptions do reflect a downward trend when compared to our recent capital program spending levels. This is primarily driven by the absence of state funds as existing sources, which are tied to specific projects like South Coast Rail and Green Line Extension, which we are expecting to wrap up spending on in the next few years. And we are also assuming relatively flat levels of MBTA bond issuance. There's also uncertainty about federal funding levels beyond fiscal year 26 when BIL, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, expires. It's unclear whether formula funding at the federal levels will be reauthorized at the current higher levels for infrastructure, or if those will maybe change or go back to the prior year's levels. To address this uncertainty, we have estimated those levels to be flat beyond fiscal year 26. Now, in a good news cautionary tale, we are conservative in this process. So this chart does not assume any additional dollars from the fair share tax funding, though we know that is going to be debated at the State House over the coming months. It also does not include any discretionary grants, which the MBTA, we are applying to everything we can. But if we were to be awarded just federal or state discretionary grants, you would see a bump out in the future years for which we cannot currently account. And I think hopefully people understand that we do that because we only want to program for things that are guaranteed. So we can go to the next slide, please. So what does that mean? That means that the MBTA has a large number of projects that are either unfunded or partially funded, given our limited availability. So this year, we are able to program $843 million in new funding. And while that is a big number, There were many projects requests that were not funded or only partially funded. And cost estimates for all of these unfunded requests that the MBTA has today from our internal staff and teams total over $11 billion. So unfunded requests remain in all CIP program types, in vehicles and in stations and in guideway, signal and power, our track programs. We see them everywhere. We have a lot of needs, and that was also clear in those donuts on the last couple of slides about we have assets that are needed in every class that need attention. This slide certainly doesn't showcase all of our unfunded requests, but is representative of some of the important work that would be up next for funding. So we try to provide both a program description of what is within the structures program, taking the first line, and then explain some of the things that are currently unfunded. So unfunded wall inspections, and unfunding, lack of funding for grade separations as an example. You can see the numbers on the right-hand side vary from anywhere around 100 million to 3.6 billion for guideway signal power, 2.3 billion for maintenance and administrative facilities, over 2 billion for our vehicles. So a lot of unmet needs still, and I will say the job of the capital program planning team is a difficult one because there are many needs that are good needs and not enough dollars to spread around. And that is the exercise we go through to then share with the public our proposed plan. To go to the next slide, please. So we have released our proposed CIP book that is available online. Possibly someone could drop a link into the chat as well, where you can find it. It details our investment priorities, the CIP development process, our key initiatives for each mode, and it highlights our capital program strategy. And it's meant to give an overview of what our capital plan includes and also our challenges and opportunities that we currently face. You can go to the next slide. In just a minute, I'm going to turn it over to Ashley to help me out. But first, I want to just remind everybody that we are in the middle of our public process, where we have hosted a public meeting last week, another one, of course, tonight. We're thrilled that you're here. We have an online comment tool that you can find at that same web address that has been put in the chat. You're welcome to comment tonight and raise your hand and share a comment. We also accept comments via email at CIP engagement@mbta.com. We also take regular mail, so you can mail it to the MBTA Capital Investment Plan at our 10 Park Plaza office here on the screen. You can find all of these contact ways also on our website. And if we go to the next slide, our process is that CIP development process is basically takes an entire school year. So we're nearing the end of our year here, but we began back in September. We will be taking public comment through May 16th. After that, the CIP team gets together to review every single comment. We do read them all, to tag every comment, to collate them, and to be able to share back with our board and internally with our staff about what changes the public wants to see. We then make any potential changes to our proposed plan, and we'll be sharing that back with our board in early June, with the hope to have our board vote. I believe the board meeting date is on June 11th. That is subject to change a little bit, so we should certainly check our website. We will ultimately post all comments as well sometime in July, so the public can see all of the comments that we receive if the plan is ultimately approved. And with that, I'm gonna, I'm not sure if there's another slide here, or I can certainly turn it over to Ashley, who's gonna help to moderate some of our questions or comments. Thank you.
Okay, we're at the end of our presentation. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Ryan. If you'd like to share a comment or ask a question, you can use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen to submit your typed question or comment to ask questions here, and members of the CIP team will be answering your questions. I'd like to note that we're going to be alternating between reading questions and comments already submitted and recognizing those who want to pose a question verbally. So please be brief so that we can hear from as many people as possible. For people who wish to share a question or comment verbally, you can press the raise hand button. For all those that are joining by phone, I see some phone numbers here. You can raise your hand by pressing star and then 9. All attendees who speak any other languages that are reflected here through interpretation, that's Spanish and Chinese, you can raise your hand to provide your comments or questions verbally for the interpreter to hear, and then repeat your comments to all of us in the room. When we recognize your name, you'll be unmuted and then you can speak. After you share your comment, we'll lower your hand and then you'll be returned back to that muted state. Before we open up the comment and question segment to the public, we'd like to invite any elected officials in attendance or their staff to ask questions or make comments. You can use your raise hand feature so that we can recognize and then unmute you. So far, out of the raised hands, I see Representative Hawkins.
There we go. Sorry, I'm traveling and I'm not so good with the technology on my phone, but I just wanted to once again, thank you. Thank you very much for all of your work, all of the communication, all the good job you do with the CIP. And of course, that's developed letting us back to using the South Attleboro train station. And I'd just like to share the gratitude from me and my entire district for the work that you've done. So thank you very much. And thank you for all you're doing tonight.
Thank you, Representative Hawkins, and thank you for all you do as well. We appreciate you. Okay, out of the raised hands, I do not see any other elected officials or their staff present, so I'll now open it up to the public. The first person that I'll ask to unmute is Patty. Nice to see you.
Hi, Ashley. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Hi, Patty.
How are you? It's nice to see you. It's Patty McCormick from the Andrews Square Civic Association. And I would like to know how Andrews Station can get on the list for capital improvements. I travel across the city all the time by train, and I don't think there's a more worthy station. So just would like some information on that.
If I can, Ashley, can I jump in? That's a great question. And we actually had some folks recently last week ask us about this as well. There are a couple different ways to sort of flag for the MBTA. One, I will note I've already flagged it for our chief of stations that folks are asking about this particular station, but in a more formal way, Ms. McCormick, the MBTA and MassDOT over the coming couple of months we'll be releasing our program for mass transit, which is our long range 25-year plan to ask the public about what we should be investing in. I'm not saying you need to wait 25 years. I'm just saying it has a really long timeline where it's looking at what should the MBTA be investing in a capital way that is unconstrained. So it's not limited to the dollars we have, but saying what should we be focused on. Certainly we can, if you've responded to any one of our meetings, you get on our emails, and so we can make sure that you know about when those are coming. I wouldn't expect meetings about that for quite a number of months, but that is one way to start to get projects into a pipeline. I will also note that when some of your neighbors brought up this station recently, I did know while there is not a specific line items for Andrews Station, there are many different ways in which we are investing in our stations that give us a little more flexibility, whether it's looking at investments across the line or investments in things like all escalators. And so we have a bucket for all escalators. If there's escalators at Andrews that need work or escalators elsewhere that need work, they can pull on those funds. And so some of those funds are available, but might not be quite as easy to find within Andrews. So those are a couple different ways to think about how we can make sure that Andrews gets the attention you think it deserves.
Thank you, Lindsay. I will now move it over to Linda.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. It's mind-boggling the numbers that you're dealing with, without a doubt. But I am also from the Andrews Square Civic Association, and I have lived in Andrews Square all my life. Andrew Station does need to be looked at. I mean, we have exposed beams that are rotted all the way, almost all the way through. I don't know who has been in there, but I am in there all the time. And it's a very sad representation of what the goal of the MBTA is. We have sent in a letter and we have many things on there. We're not talking billions of dollars, not by a long shot, but we certainly are talking about cleanup and some repair. And I can tell you, from the day that they opened the Andrew Station, when they redid it, which was many, many moons ago, the first rainstorm, the water was dripping on the stairs. We still have that. But now we have, it's almost like stalagmites coming out of the ceiling, going onto the stairs. And when they hit the stairs, it starts raising up. There's mold on the walls. These things are probably much easy fixes than fixing rails. I can't imagine having this whole process under my jurisdiction to take care of because it's overwhelming. But we definitely have many, many people, and we have a lot more housing that is being built that has been approved through BPDA. We have a housing development that is going to be redone and going from 1,016 units to over 3,000. That's a lot of people. We need the station cleaned in however way that we can help you to get money for this, to have this done, is what we're looking for. And like I said, this doesn't represent the job that you people are doing, not at all. This is, you know, a dark mark instead of a good mark. So let's get it into a nice, bright, good mark. If we can work together, I would greatly appreciate that, whatever we have to do to see that we can get some of these improvements done. And I thank you very much for your time. And we hope to hear from you. Thank you.
And
Thank you, Linda.
yeah, thank you for the comment. And I did share the other day a way that I would love to make sure that we're connecting with some of those developments that you say are coming. The MBTA does have a transit-oriented development team, and at times we try to think about ways in which developer dollars can also be invested into transit to make sure that as communities are growing and hopefully benefiting from transit, we can also make sure that there's at the time appropriate contributions to whether capital things, you know, fixing things that are broken or ongoing costs. So thank you very much for the comments about Andrew.
Yeah, thank you. And we're well aware of that. But if you read the letter that was sent in, you will see that we have quite a few developers who are doing large projects who would probably be interested in helping to get the station to where it would be, like I said, a good light instead of a dark light on the MBTA, without a doubt. Thank you very much.
Linda, I'd like to say that we have received your letter. It's on my desk and we've made note of your comments.
Thank you.
No problem. I'm now going to move this over to Sarah Freeman. Unmuting.
Hi, everyone. I think you answered one of my, I'm asking about the Arborway bus facility. And you answered one question about the repurposed funding. My other question is P1002 says Arborway bus operators trailer replacement, installation of permanent modular buildings to replace existing temporary trailers. It's funny, last night someone just asked about concrete they saw. And my question is, seeing the word permanent on a part of the site that may not be part of the future facility was a little confusing. Is there anyone here that can explain what the permanent refers to?
Yeah, so we do have quite a large number of modular structures across the MBTA. I'm one of those staff people who would love to someday see all of our staff in proper facilities, but they are a cheaper way for us to at times also deal with some of the flexibility where we need workforce potentially for short-term work. I can appreciate the word permanent and modular in the same line item is a little confusing. I'm happy to take a look at that. I don't have an answer for you this evening, but I will make sure that my team takes a peek at that and make sure that those dollars are getting appropriately spent.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you. Did you have a question about Arborway, or are you clear on what we're doing with Arborway, ma'am? I just didn't want to skip over that.
I think I'm clear on the rest, or we have ongoing wishes to communicate, but not about the budget so much.
Okay, fair. Thank you very much.
Yes, Sarah, thank you for always attending our Arbor Way meetings and for sharing all of your insights. We really appreciate it. And in terms of the pouring of the concrete, when we checked in on that, that was for a replacement restroom structure. But I can share more information with you or find out anything else that you need later on today via email, Sarah. Thank you for all your comments in the Arbor Way meetings. Now we're going to move over to Hassan.
Yes, hi. Thanks for all your work on this. Really appreciated learning about this. My name is Hassan Faruqi. I live in Boston, ride the T, and I'm part of the Boston Climate Action Network and the Green Justice Coalition, which brings labor and environmental groups together. And I'm excited about all these different projects that are happening. I wanted to add as a piece of feedback, I would really love for us to commit to using project labor agreements, pre-hire collective bargaining agreements on all of the different projects that are happening, particularly these large projects. We can get workers into jobs more efficiently, get high quality work done, high quality compensation for the workers who are doing those jobs, and also make sure that we're helping meet our supplier diversity goals. You know, I really appreciated in this plan that we're making an intentional focus on our environmental justice communities. That's great. We need to make sure we really get good transit access in those communities, but also have an opportunity to make sure that the workers who are doing all this work can also come from those communities. And those are some of the things we can also include in the project labor agreements. So appreciate your consideration of that in the plan. And certainly if you have any additional relevant facts to share about that, I'm happy to listen to those as well. But thank you so much.
Thank you. We appreciate your comment and your suggestion as well. Now transferring this over to Carolyn.
Oh, hi. Thanks very much for the presentation. I also have a question about Arbor Way Yard in Jamaica Plain. I didn't really understand where the repurpose money was coming from. If you could just explain that again. And I'd like to know how that changes the timeline. Like right now it's going through its design process. Does this repurpose of the funds change what's planned for the design team this year? And does it change the overall timeline for the construction of the new facility? And also just wanted to also give a thank you to Ashley and the other members of the MBTA team who always are willing to come out and talk to us often. So just thank you. And yeah, if you could answer those.
I will echo my
questions.
appreciation for Ashley and team. Let me see if I can try again and explain where we are with Arbor Way. Again, Arbor Way is probably our most critical bus investment that we need to make as an authority over the coming years, both to meet our decarbonization goals, but also to modernize facilities for our staff and to ultimately meet some of the statutory requirements that we have that have come out of the State House. Arbor Way facility at our estimates today is going to cost approximately 511, we'll call it $510 million. So $500 million for Arbor Way. It's a large facility. It's going to have a lot of buses. It's certainly a big piece of property. The MBTA does not currently have the dollars to construct Arbor Way. That is a problem. We only have this year $43 million, and this project, as I said, is 511. So it's very substantial. We had, before this recent change, $33 million sitting in the design line item. So you can kind of think of it as a design line item and then a construction line item. In reality, for design, we probably need $2 to $3, maybe $4 million to complete the design of Arbor Way. All of the rest of the dollars are needed for construction. What the MBTA has historically done is, in some of these big projects, and we overfund the design, right? Well beyond what is needed, because we're essentially building our nest egg for the ultimate construction. That works for some projects that are a little bit smaller, where over the course of 2 or 3 years, as you're designing it, we can invest 20 million one year, 20 million the next, and 20 million the following for a $60 million project. But if we did Arbor Way in $25 million increments, it'll take us way too long. And so we're going to need a different strategy for Arbor Way. So when the general manager learned that we were holding $33 million in Arbor Way's design, but we don't yet have a plan for all of the construction dollars, and they only need that, 2, 3, 4 million, he said, well, let's take some of those dollars and put it towards those vehicles that we can spend today. Because frankly, having your tax dollars sit in a line item that we can't use yet, he didn't think was the most efficient way for us to spend our dollars. The design is still very much on time. That is not a problem. We intend to deliver Arbor Way on time, should we get sufficient construction dollars. And so the reality is the gap between the money that we have to design and the money that we need to construct is still quite large. And so that is why some of those dollars are being repurposed. Did that make it any better? Did I explain it any more clearly? Okay.
Very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it is still very important. And I think as a state and as a region, electrifying our buses is certainly an ambitious goal. It comes at quite a cost, and one that we don't yet have a comprehensive plan.
So with if it's still on a timeline to be constructed, so the design will still be relevant.
Absolutely, yes.
Like way out there and not having that thing get constructed.
Exactly. And it's actually a concern of the general managers when things get designed and then put on a shelf, because by the time you go back to it, we have a problem that the design is out of date, right? Or the resiliency features aren't good enough anymore, or who knows, right? And so we're certainly very attentive to that. And ultimately, I think as a state, we need to think about how are we going to find the necessary dollars for some of these very, very big projects. Arbor Way happens to be one of our nearest term, but there are many others, sadly, on the list that also need a sizable portion of dollars to get to completion.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking and caring about us.
Thank you, Carolyn. So I know that there's a real question in the chat. I will be getting to that question. And then there's also someone in the chat who mentioned, I think it was Sherry, that they can't unmute themselves. So I'll also unmute Sherry after this real question. The question is, are there plans to use multiple unit rail cars?
I think some of my colleagues from commuter rail are on. I'm not sure if this is a question. I guess I need a little more information. Is that referring to on commuter rail, or is that battery electric?
Hallie, I'm going to unmute you so that you can provide any other additional clarification to this question. And then I'll also unmute Alistair too to help answer this question. Hallie, are you able to unmute?
I meant on the commuter rail.
Yeah, so thank you. I see 2 questions. So I have to be a little careful how to answer this because there is a current unsolicited proposal to implement this program to do 20-minute decarbonized service on the Fairmont line. So we've received that proposal. We had already had a plan, which was, as I think you've noted, battery electric, multiple units. So it is those multiple unit rail cars, and using battery electric to accelerate the delivery. So the unsolicited proposal we received from Keolis is to deliver that and to do it in a faster time frame, benefiting from the use of that battery technology, rather than waiting to put up catenary all the way from Reedville to South Station. So that's part of the proposal. So we are entertaining through that process, alternative ways of achieving that same goal. And that's part of what we're required to do is this open process. And once that comes to an end, we'll be able to say which method we're finally selecting and how we're going to go about it in more detail. But at this stage, we're waiting for that other submittals coming through.
And just for clarification, Haley, the current CIP includes the dollars necessary for the infrastructure investments to support battery electric EMUs. And even though service is still a few years out, just so everyone's clear, but we can start making some of those investments in our infrastructure that we would need for that proposal to go forward.
Yeah, and I think the final point is that's been our plan, as you may have seen all along, because it accelerates the delivery of decarbonized service around the whole system. So the benefit becomes even bigger when we can use the existing Northeast Corridor and the overhead wires on the Northeast Corridor, and then serve all our branch lines from that corridor, and then start looking at quick ways of implementing also on the North Shore as well, the EJ line. And that's what we've been planning. And that was mentioned in Lindsay's presentation earlier. So, thank you. Any more questions?
Okay. The next question is, with regard to the CIP, how much is allocated to WBE, DBE, and MBEs?
So the planning process says that a project is going to be selected. I'll stick with Alistair's example, infrastructure investments for the electrification or decarbonization on the Fairmount line. The ultimate selector of a vendor for any project, though, would then go through various ways that we can procure services, and that is most often also some services. Some investments are done in-house with in-house staff and workforce when we can, but maybe we're buying materials, and so when we procure construction contracts, we're buying materials, we're buying professional services to do design work. That is when we think about looking to make sure that we're meeting our DBE goals, not at this process in planning where we say that project makes sense, this program makes sense, they should have the money, and then it would go through a formal process to actually determine who would deliver it and make sure that we're meeting some of those goals that we have set for ourselves. So I hope that helps explain when that comes into the process.
And I quickly add, as the intention with the current round of projects, at a project level, there's DBE or XBE goals, in fact, all the different business enterprise goals. And then I think somebody also mentioned project labor agreements. Again, those tend to be for larger projects, and that's where they have the benefit, and they are common practice in the industry. So I'm sure we'll be utilizing them.
Thank you for that, Alistair. Sherry, you're unmuted now, I think.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Good evening. Thank you guys so much for allowing me to be here tonight. I am a middle-aged senior citizen in my mid-70s. I am a member of the United Neighborhood Association, chaired by Teresa Latson in Dorchester. My concern is I used to ride the MBTA a lot. I have been cautious about riding it of lately due to feeling safe on the MBTA. Seniors were attacked either at the stations or on the bus or the train. Is there any funding to go towards safety in terms of having an MBTA police officer ride, be on one of the rides for future?
Sure. So the MBTA certainly has a complicated budgeting process. The proposal tonight is how we spend our capital dollars over the next few years, or our proposed way to spend those. I will note our transit police staff will come out of our operating budget, and so if we thought we needed more policing, ma'am, we would find those dollars there. We do, however, have safety is important to MBTA every day, and we know that safety can be achieved by staff. It can be achieved by better lighting. It can be achieved by better access. It could be achieved by better radios. And there are many different ways in which the MBTA is investing in some safety initiatives across the system. Maybe Ashley, if we're able to get contact information, we can give a little bit of a follow-up list. I don't have those right off the tip of my tongue, but some of the ways in which we're investing in safety across the system. But this program wouldn't directly fund police officers. That would come out of our
Okay.
operating budget.
Okay, thank you so
You're
much
very
for that.
welcome. Sure.
Mhm.
And
So
Sherry,
we
I have
fund
your
the lights
email.
and the cameras, and we can fund other things that could impact safety, was the point I was trying to make. So sorry, Ashley.
Absolutely.
And Sherry, I have your email, so we'll be emailing you any follow-up that we receive from that.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for joining us. We have 2 comments from Andy. The 2 questions, actually. The first is, how will decisions be made for refunding the deferred programs projects like Longfellow Viaduct Rehabilitation or the commuter rail facility in Billerica and track/signal upgrades on the central tunnel?
Yeah, I think hi Andy, how are you? I'm glad you're with us this evening. Certainly the MBTA is in a difficult position. We have decided to prioritize the track improvement program and make sure that the reliability of our service is paramount, and frankly relates to the safety of our system. The MBTA, with every dollar we get, has to decide what is the best use of those dollars, and we've made the choices that we have over the last year to ensure that that program has sufficient funding. Whenever we get available dollars, likely are in next year's CIP, but frankly could come in through the state budgeting process and state bonding and other such ways that aren't maybe quite on our annual cycle. We are going to have to hold all of those projects up and under a bright light say, do these ones jump to the top of the list, or are there other reasons that we have to fund other projects or other priorities? As I have said, in no way has the general manager said those projects aren't important or we don't want to go forward with them, but has said that those dollars could be better spent today on something that could help our riders in the nearer term. So that challenge is going to live with the capital investment plan team to continue to struggle with that, given that we don't have the dollars to do all of the things that we need to do today. And ultimately, I say, Ashley, just to round that out, big changes to that are something on an annual basis we want to bring to our board and have a public process to make sure everyone knows what we're doing and why.
And then Andy has 2 other questions alongside that. The next one is, one thing that isn't very clear in the online documents is just how much funding is being allocated to station repairs. The only number shown is unfunded requests. Does the MBTA have a number of how much is proposed for station repairs?
Sure. And I see my team has been trying to pull that together, that our passengers facilities program currently has $1.1 billion that is predominantly for either station repairs or upgrades. And so we do have that is over the 5-year cycle. If the question is new dollars, I don't have that number off the top of my head. I'm not sure, Ryan, if you have an answer to that one and want to jump in here.
We can definitely get that and supply that in a follow-up.
Great. I definitely have Andrew's email. That we can get.
We will get that to him.
Okay.
Okay, and one final question from Andy. A big concern in the Cambridge community has been about the number of out-of-service escalators. Does the MBTA have a program for escalator repairs? How much is funded in this CIP?
I believe we have 9.8 million programmed over the 5-year window for our system-wide escalator and elevator replacement program. If you're looking at our CIP, Andy, you can find that's project P 1225. I believe though there's also a separate escalator upgrades included in a bunch of our larger station projects. So we have funding to go and work on escalators throughout the system, but if we're going to do a big project, we might upgrade all of the escalators and elevators at that point in time too. And so ordinarily, general maintenance may live on the operating budget, but if it's a significant repair and modification to that asset, it would live on the capital budget. And so replacements would end up living on the capital budget. And I'm glad to know there's a lot of them in Cambridge. I'm going to just flag that for other members of our teams to make sure that they're paying attention to that.
Thank you for the questions, Andy. We really appreciate it, and we'll be sure to follow up on anything that we missed here. Our next question is, does Arborway rebuild still include a new operations center as proposed earlier?
I am pretty sure it does no longer include it, but I'm not positive. Who do we have on the call? Is Seth on the call with us this evening from?
We can touch base with the project team after and follow up on that
Yeah.
soon as well, if that's helpful.
There have been different moments in time where an additional operations control center or a backup operations control center, we've tried to find ways to make sure that we could have some redundancy in our system potentially. I don't believe that is any longer scheduled for Arborway, but why don't we say we'll actually try to get back to Mr. Kirkpatrick and make sure that is the case.
Yeah, don't worry, Dennis. I will get back to you via email once I receive the response for that. Okay, Linda, is this an old hand or a new hand? I'm not sure. So I'll skip you for now until you let me know in the chat, and I'll go to Clint. Clint?
Hi, thank you. Clint Richmond from the Massachusetts Sierra Club. I just want to say that we join with many others in strongly supporting the 20-minute regional rail model of service that's being proposed for the Fairmount line. And I think this is arguably the highest goal for the Fairmount line to address the mobility needs of the neighborhood, and perhaps even higher than the goal of electrification. I make this comment because we have many serious concerns about the battery units and the total cost, including its required infrastructure. And the T's Rail Vision Plan from 2019 originally called for diesel multiple units or ultimately traditional catenary. And we could also continue to use the existing type equipment or other diesel units. And we're wondering if that would save time and money, and environmental impacts don't have to be met directly by the equipment. We could also prioritize this neighborhood for battery buses and hopefully get to 100% sooner if there were costs that could be reallocated toward that goal. Thank you.
I think for this one, I'm going to say, Alistair, we're still in an active procurement and trying to decide on some of the future design elements. I hear you loud and clear, and I'm really glad to hear from the Sierra Club about some of that. But Alistair, I just want to remind you, if you want to jump in, I see you wanting to jump in, feel free. But
yeah, no, I just wanted to jump in to address the point about the traction power technology, which is a policy we've made system wide, so it's not specific to this line. I understand there's some concerns about a particular part of the cost of a total project, which is the cost of a battery. And obviously there are some environmental impacts to a battery. But in the scheme of things, it is over the 700 track miles of system, a huge ask to try and put up overhead catenary. It is a huge cost. It is significantly outweighed the cost of putting batteries because of the advances in technology on existing electric multiple units. So the concept is just an existing conventional, as you might want to call it, electric multiple unit with an added battery. So we have done extensive analysis over multiple years, looking at specific lines, how much power it takes, how much power we would then need to invest in the battery. And we're just watching the battery costs go down and the permitting costs, delays, risks go up as construction inflation goes up. So if anything, the argument from the analysis we did in 2022 is now actually significantly harder. And I would contend that, firstly, DMUs don't really exist in this country, so there isn't really that option. There are a few old models that may be possible to purchase, but those don't really exist. And using existing equipment doesn't have the acceleration to deliver the benefit on the Fairmont line, even with one of the initiatives we're looking at, which is renewable diesel. So there are ways to mitigate that, and we'll still investigate all those as intervening steps. But the key point about battery electric is that we can deliver this faster. And there are some, as I think we've described in other presentations, there are other authorities around the US, Chicago and California, that have made a big advance on this. So it's a lot of good reasons, a lot of research, and a lot of expert knowledge and modeling. And obviously it doesn't actually hit the project, but there is a reason why we're doing it this way, and that is to minimize the amount of infrastructure we need. And it's a lot cheaper to do it that way than 100% OC overhead catenary EMU solution. And we have people who've done this advising us, including myself, who have done some of this. We have a lot of experience of what happens trying to do 100%. There we go.
If I could just have a quick follow-up, did that modeling also include dual, catenary diesel equipment, like the Siemens charger, which I'm sure you're familiar with?
Yep. Yes, it did. So we looked at that. That's actually, in some ways, mechanically the worst of both worlds. And again, still emissions, still issues. So we are following a basic direction in terms of decarbonizing point of use, and this is the way to achieve it. And in fact, frankly, I think they're probably cheaper than bimodes, the diesel OCS-based bimodes. And again, that's just a function of the way the technology is moving. So we have no concerns, and we think it de-risks the project. So there's both the cost of the project and then the likelihood of things like permitting delays, interconnects with the grid, all those issues that have beset other projects like the Caltrain electrification. We would be avoiding, and we could mitigate around. And yes, you could do that with diesel as well, but those tend to be more expensive, and currently none of those are also Buy America compliant either at the moment. So there's a lot of issues to navigate around, but it is not an ideal solution. It would have been a good solution about 10 years ago, but battery has frankly overtaken it. So we're not alone in this analysis either. There are other authorities in the US that have come up with the same conclusion, and also in Europe, as you probably read. So it seems to be the way of the future. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're now going to pass this over to Joanne.
Hi. Joanne Daniels Feingold. It should be no surprise to anyone that my primary interest in all of our discussions here tonight has been safety and accessibility. And there are times in projects that don't even directly face the passengers, but are critical when it comes to safety in particular. Functioning of the OCCs, cameras in where they're needed. But I realize too that in the process of some projects, there may come a time that there are changes that are to be made. And I just want to be sure that people, whether they're an engineer or someone in operations center, has safety, or somebody who's designing any part of the system, that no matter what project you have, that safety and accessibility are number one. That doesn't leave. The whole purpose of the T is to move passengers, and those passengers have to get where they're going safely. And I know but it has nothing to do with projects that are in place to be coming on board, but it's critical. It really is. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. I appreciate the comments very much so.
Okay, it looks like we don't have any other questions or comments or raise hands. Feel free to raise your hand if you do, or send any in the chat. Just want to make sure that I'm accurately representing what's reflected here on my end. Going once, going twice. Okay, Clint, what percentage of the double and triple tracking has to be completed to date, has been completed to date, and what is the estimate for completing it? What percentage of the double and triple tracking has been completed to date, and what is the estimate for completing it?
I think Ashley, we're gonna have to take that one as a follow-up because we have individual projects that are double and triple track. So I don't know that I can answer as a whole about all of those, but happy to share something offline with Clint about that. No problem.
Wonderful. Clint, we have your email, so we'll get in touch with you when we have that response. Okay, any other questions or comments? Going once, twice, 3 times. Okay. Well, everyone, it was a pleasure meeting with you all tonight. Thank you so much for your questions or comments. We greatly appreciate it, and we'll be in touch with anyone who needs further follow-up. Have a great night. Bye.
Thank you. Good night.